Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hello and welcome to the 39th episode. My name's Ryan Blake, I'm the founder and director of Extreme Sports Performance. In this episode we're speaking to Alexander Nilsson. Alexander is a professional freediver and we ask him the questions we ask all our guests. Who he is, what he does, where has he come from and what has he done along the way, what are the key moments from his career so far, what are his top areas of interest, what are the most valuable things he's learnt, who are his top influencers, what are his top resources for information, what are his top sports performance exercises and or drills, what are his top pieces of advice, and finally, where can people find him. As usual, we freestyle in between questions all the way through this. Found recording this fascinating and very interesting. I learned a lot of things that I didn't know. Hope you enjoy listening to it. Here we go. Hi, Alexander, welcome to the Extreme Sports Performance Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm really happy to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
So please could you start telling everybody who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Alexander and I'm a freediver, which means that I dive deep on a breath hold. And yeah, I've been doing that now for around 6 years. And I've been concentrating on diving as deep as possible. So, in freediving, there's a lot of different disciplines. And you're like a pool side of freediving as well. And then there's a depth part. And I've been focusing on the depth freediving. And since I started 5 years ago, I took the Swedish national record around 3 years ago, if I remember correctly. And that was with, in a discipline in freediving we call constant weight with bifins, which means that you're diving as deep as you can with like long snorkeling fins would be the easiest way to describe it for like non-freedivers. And that dive was to 73 meters. And it took around 2.5 minutes. So you can hear like the dive time is not that long, but when it comes to freediving, it's all about like being able to cope with the pressure and also be able to cope with the stress during a freediving competition. Because it's one thing to be able to do it in like a training situation, but then completely different thing to do it when you actually go to a competition. So this is what I've been doing for the past 6 years. We've just been traveling around the world, been freediving, going from one depth competition to another. Most of them are in really beautiful places, like I spent a lot of time in the Philippines and in Bali and Dahab in Egypt was one of my hubs. So it's very similar to like the surf league, if people know about that. So you go from one place to another, and then you just go to these very tropical places and just dive as deep as you can. So I felt very privileged to have lived this life for this past 6 years. And it took a hold, like, when the pandemic hit, I had to go back home to Sweden because, of course, it was impossible to go to all these beautiful places. And I went back to Sweden, and now I'm here. And I went back to studying, actually. So now I'm studying to become a health coach. Yeah. So I'm just here now and I'm doing my freediving courses here in Stockholm, even though, as you can imagine, we don't do much depth diving, but I'm teaching as much as I can when I can come to the depth. We have like 2 or 3 months during the summer where it's actually like decent conditions, so I can still teach some beginner courses. And other than that, I'm just trying to teach as much pool courses. And yeah, waiting for the world to open up again so we can go on and just continue like doing these depth competitions like we used to.
Amazing. I've got so many questions I want to ask you. Just before I start the ball rolling with those, how did you get into this? How did you come across it? How did you discover it? What led you down this path?
Yeah, so when I was 20, I think it was like 21, I went on this backpacking trip, and I've just finished like my studies, and then I went on this backpacking trip, and I had no clue what to do with my life, like most people do in their like early 20s. And I stumbled upon this freediving center in a small island in Thailand, which is called Koh Lanta. And I saw this sign outside this freediving center, and I remember that one of my favorite movies when I was a kid was The Big Blue. I don't know if have you seen it?
Yeah, I have.
Le Grand Bleu, it's the original name, the French movie. And since I saw that movie, I was always very intrigued by the ocean and the depth in particular. And I think from watching that movie, it planted a seed in my mind of like always coming back to the ocean. And most of the freedivers that I met, they actually been growing up in a place close to the ocean, in a place where there been like fathers or being fishermen or so on, and they had easy access to water. But I grew up in Stockholm, in Sweden, where the water is like 10 degrees Celsius, and it's gray or black water. It's really not good for freediving or snorkeling for that matter. So I didn't really have that exposure to the depth, but I had always this feeling that I wanted to know what it was down there in the depth. And I have very vivid memories of when I was a kid, when I was like 5 or 6 years old. And we had this summer cottage house we used to go to in the summer. And me and my father, we always went out in the morning with the boat to take up the nets because we were fishing. And I was always sitting in the front of the boat asking my father, who was driving the boat, like, how deep is it here? How deep is it here? How deep is it here? Like every 10 seconds until, he got really annoyed at me. But I did it all the time because I was always so, I don't know, it was something about the mysteriousness of the depth that really intrigued me, that I wanted to explore. And of course, that was just in me from that age. And then when I saw this freediving sign in Thailand, like learn how to freedive and how to dive deep to, I don't know, 20 meters on your first course, I saw that and I was like, this is what I should try and see what would happen if I do it, because I had this urge, you can say.
Yeah, sure.
But which I have at that point I hadn't explored yet.
Mm-hmm.
And from that course on, I had a really good freediving instructor, which is very important. Like you have an instructor who's very passionate about freediving. And I remember after the first course, she told me that, okay, if you want to continue and do the next course, you will experience something that is called the free fall. And when I heard that, and when she explained what a free fall is, and that it's actually that you're just sinking like a rock down to the bottom after around 15 meters. Well, after I heard that, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna keep on practicing and see wherever it takes me. Yeah.
Amazing. So, if someone has never freediving before, and for instance, when you started, what's the first things that you need to make sure that are in place, or the first things that you practice or focus on right at the beginning?
Yeah, so the first thing that you will practice is just breathing techniques. So you want to get the right breathing, and you want to get awareness of your body and to be able to relax your body. We usually say that freediving is 90% mental and 10% body. And what we mean there is like it's so important to be able to relax mentally and also to be able to relax with your muscles, because when you have a tense muscle, you're using up more oxygen. So that's the first thing you want to do.
Okay.
And then from there on, you can start incorporating more technique training to get the person to get a good finning technique and good hydrodynamic posture in the water. But the first thing is just being able to relax in the water.
Sure. Okay. I'm definitely going to dive deeper into the specifics of training like later on during the chat. And just coming back to what you just said about the breathing techniques, is that something that you do out the water first? Or is it something that you have to familiarize yourself with in the water?
So this is usually something that I do outside of the water.
Yeah.
We are very close to yoga. A lot of people that start with freediving, they come from yoga or vice versa. So, and there you do a lot of pranayama. So breathing techniques when you focus on the awareness of the diaphragm. And important thing in freediving is to be able to stretch your diaphragm and to have a flexible diaphragm muscle. So you're able to control your breathing. So that's the biggest part of the breathing technique itself. And then we do very simple techniques like being able to breathe with your belly and just have one hand at the chest and one hand at the belly, and just being able to get the lower hand to move and to get these different sections moving like as you want it. And there I actually do this breathing techniques dry. And that comes also to breath holding part. So when you do freediving, number one rule is to always do it with a trained body in the water. Otherwise, it's very dangerous. But when you do breath holding training, you can do it in your bed. Like you're safe if you do it. We call it the dry training in freediving. So when I was training the most before competitions and so on, I used to hold my breath every single morning in different sections for at least 1 hour every morning. And then that would be also on exhale, which means that you're exhaling all the air that you can breathe out, and then you hold your breath like that. Just to explore and to get your body to this kind of like low oxygen stress and to adapt your body to that. Because this is something that you can train your body to be able to cope with low levels of oxygen. Like I usually say, an untrained person faints or black out in freediving term at around 50% oxygen saturation in the body. And when I trained this the most, I had this oxygen saturation meter on my finger, and I was able to get down to 22%.
Wow.
Which is, of course, I had it here, not in my ear, so it's not like 100% accurate.
Sure.
But still, I was able to get it down quite a lot, and I was still like lucid, and I was still quite awake at that point.
So what would you say, since you've started, this is I suppose a double-folded question, so what would you say the key physiological changes that have happened to your body since you started from day one to now. And what have been the key moments from that you've experienced during the time that you've been freediving?
The easiest thing to measure was actually my lung capacity. So what happens to my lungs? Like, how are they getting bigger, or are they staying the same? Or are they actually getting smaller? Because I've also seen some people that train a lot of depth, their lungs are actually adapting to that. But when it comes to me, I did a spirometer test when I began freediving, and my lungs were around 5 liters.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
That was my volume. And after 5 years of freediving, there were 7.5 liters.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's possible to get bigger lungs. And for people who want to know how to get bigger lungs, the answer would just be, when it comes to freediving, to hold your breath on full lungs and to be able to take a big inhale and then just hold the breath like that. Because what actually, when it comes to like what actually determines if you have big lungs or small lungs is more about the flexibility of the rib cage. Like if you have a very flexible rib cage, your lungs can inflate quite a lot. You can see the lungs as like sponges.
Yeah.
Like balloons are not the best way to think of them, because a balloon is blowing up, or if it gets too big. But the lungs, you can see them more as sponges, so you fill them up, and the only thing that constricts the lungs is the thoracic cavity. So being able to stretch the thoracic cavity will enable you to take a bigger inhale, and therefore also having bigger lungs. And one good stretching technique that I noticed, which helped me a lot, was to you lay down on your back on the floor, and then you put ball in the middle of your back and just stretch out your arms like that. And then you lay like that and breathe normally for 10 minutes. And that's a really good thoracic cavity stretch. Because I think it's beneficial for everybody, no matter what sport you do, or if you're an endurance athlete, to be able to take a lot of air into the lungs and have bigger lungs.
Do you know of, or do you feel that technique or these specific breathing techniques to freediving can cross over and have physiological benefits to other activities, other sports?
Yeah, for sure. Like, since I had to stop competing now for a while because of the pandemic, I started to do more like endurance sports, and I started to do like longish runs. I went on a trail running race for 30K.
Yeah.
And like I saw it was quite a quick transition for me to be able to run longer distances. And I think the reason for that is that I'm able to cope with higher levels of carbon dioxide.
Right.
Yeah, because one thing that usually blows most my, like when I teach the first freediving course, what people don't really think about is when you hold your breath, and the reason why you want to breathe is because you have higher levels of carbon dioxide. It has nothing to do with lower levels of oxygen, like most people think. So a lot of the freediving training is just about being able to cope with high levels of carbon dioxide in your body, to be able to cope with this like discomfort of like having to breathe. And I think having done that for like 6 years, and then going out running and having this like buildup of CO2 felt quite okay for me, which made me I was able to then run further with less discomfort. So I think that's applicable to many different sports when it comes to like being able to cope with that kind of discomfort of high levels of carbon dioxide. There is a lot of work coming out now when it comes to breathing techniques and to be able to breathe less in a sport. I don't know if you read Breathe, I think it's called, this book about how to, in simple terms, just do your sport and breathe less while you do them. Like be able to breathe through your nose instead of your mouth is one big thing, which I also do when I'm out running. I'm trying to, as long as possible, just having my mouth closed. And there also you can do a lot of different things. You can breathe when you sleep, for example. You can tape your mouth.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
So which means that when you're sleeping, you're not over breathing. Because what happens when a lot of people open their mouth while they're sleeping is that they breathe out too much carbon dioxide. And this is not good because you don't get the oxygen to the cells. You get this called Bohr effect. So the hemoglobin sticks, and you don't get the release of the oxygen to the cell.
Okay.
And it's a really good idea to have a slight urge to breathe while you're doing your exercise, to be able to get more oxygen out to the cell. Of course, to some extent, because if you do more intense kind of exercise, you need to open your mouth and breathe to be able to get the oxygen out to the cell. But I think a lot of sports have something to learn there, to not overbreathe.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Did you also notice any other physiological changes to maybe to heart rate or to blood pressure? Has that got better or lower over time, or has that not really changed much for you?
Yeah, that's also something that I've noticed. And when it comes to heart rate, my heart rate have been going down.
Yeah.
Like if I put my head in the water, I also have done this test that I put the pulse oximeter on my finger and I put my face into the water. And it's really interesting to see what happens, because we have something that is called the mammalian diving response that everybody has. And this is something that we share with other mammals that lives in the water, like dolphins and seals. And they have it to a greater extent, of course. But we have the same response when we're going into the ocean. When we put our face in the water, we have sensors around our nose and around our mouth. When those sensors detect that we are under the water, our heart rate slows down instantly. So that happens instantly. You've probably seen in videos that, like in movies, that they splash water on their face to calm down. And that's actually like a thing that happens in our body. When we get cold water on our face, our heart rate slows down instantly. And I put this oxygen meter on my finger, which was also measuring pulse. And there I could see that it was started at like 90 beats per minute, and it went down to around 39 in just under a minute.
Wow.
And that's just by putting my face into the water. So that's something that I also see, back to your question there, if it's something that I've seen long term, like my resting heart rate, of course, went down quite a lot when I was freediving,
Yeah.
because my metabolic rate went down. And it went down to I think my resting heart rate was 40 something. And that was continuing. Blood pressure, I actually haven't, I don't know, but I think it went down as well. It's a good idea to have a low blood pressure when you're holding your breath to be able to relax. So that's something that I don't know if it actually went down,
Yeah.
but there's been a lot of different things that have been going on, losing a lot of size,
Yeah.
depending on
Yeah.
discipline.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to static breath holding, which I was training for a while, this is just when you hold your breath laying still in the water. And when you do that, the aim is to not have much muscle, and pretty much you just want bones and big lungs on your body. and there, I could fluctuate a lot on my weight when I was training for that discipline, or if I was training for depth.
Does muscle mass or fat mass make a difference to your efficiency of being able to utilize oxygen and manage your carbohydrate levels? Is there a difference between someone who is very muscly or very fat versus someone who is quite slender and skinny?
Yeah, when it comes to fat, you cannot really see any difference. I've seen a lot of quite heavy people being able to dive to 100 meters,
Wow. Okay.
like propelling themselves down and up as well. Like, there's not much difference, because freediving is a sport where it's so much about the mental and so little about the body. So you can still be super good freediver even though you're like 60 years old and you have a little bit of like blubber and you're not having the best cardio, but you can still be super good freediver just because you're able to relax. You're able to put yourself to a very trance-like state and relax your muscles. That's so important in freediving. So that wins over having the best built physique for freediving. It's so much more important to be able to relax mentally and to go down there and to cope with the pressure and not being stressed down there. That's the main point. And of course, when it comes to muscles, it's a good idea to not have too much unnecessary. Like, you want to have muscles on those body parts where you're gonna need them. So for example, if I'm going down with bifins, I want to have strong quadriceps and hamstrings, and I want to have a flexible upper body to be able to be streamlined. Like, that's my priority for that. Yeah, but of course you need to be well rounded.
Yeah, I suppose it's like any sport, isn't it? You have to have the somatotype, the right body shape, or a body shape in an appropriate range. Because obviously some sports are very, very varied for your position or for your main job, and
Exactly.
and your physiology has to match that. So that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say the key moments have been from your kind of experience freediving, like things that really positive takeaways or really negative takeaways that you've come across personally for you?
So I think when it comes to the best moments and the moments that comes to my mind straight away when I think about this is when I took the national record. Just after being freediving for 3 years, this was something that I never dreamt of. when I went into freediving, my whole goal was just to be able to free fall as far as possible and so as long as possible. And my priority was never to really reach a certain depth or to be able to take any medals or records or anything like that. And that's also one interesting thing with freediving, that you can never have this kind of goal in your mind when you're freediving, because then it's impossible to go to a certain depth. I've been trying to dive to, say, 80 meters and really wanting to go down there, like, right, really wanting to get to this bottom plate. But then something in me locks. I'm tensing up and I cannot go down there. The only way to get down there is to have this kind of ease in mind and just enjoying the process and focusing on the next goal and the next goal during the dive. And therefore, in that way, being able to tap into the flow state, which is very common in most extreme sports, that to be able to achieve something in the sport, you have to be able to let go of what you're trying to achieve, which is super hard to do. Because of course I want to dive down there, but I had to kind of like forget that, at least during the dive. And that was something that I realized, and I think something that really helped me to be able to get this beautiful moment when I took this national record. Because it was kind of like after I came up from the dive, I was kind of surprised. I didn't really say.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Expect it. I was like, okay, I go down and see what happens. And I'm there during the competition to enjoy the time with my freediving friends and just hanging out with buddies. And then if I make it, I make it. And with that kind of thought and that kind of mentality, I was able to get down there and up. And then that was a very beautiful moment. And then I really understood what freediving was about, and it's not about like reaching a goal or reaching a certain milestone. And I think it goes for everything in life. When you reach something, you're kind of reaching this plateau, and then you're asking yourself, okay, what's next and what's next? But it's so important to just enjoy the process. And it goes for every sport. And of course, it's important to have goals in mind and to be able to look forward to something and to have something to train for. But it's even more important to enjoy the process and to just have fun with it and have this kind of like playful mind in the sport. And that's something that I saw was very, very evident when it came to freediving, because I was training and I was competing with the world record of freediving, Alexei Molchanov, who's a Russian beast who's diving down to 130 meters. And I saw how he was diving, and I could learn so much from his state of mind, just playing around in the water and just having fun doing it. And I think that goes for a lot of sport, like just being able to be playful while you're competing on the highest level is on one hand really hard, but it's so useful when it comes to be able to perform in these stressful situations. So that was like one thing that really stuck in my mind when I took this national record. And when it comes to like a hard experience, like some tough, I think it must have been when I had I had this first competition that I went to, and I had been training so hard for a whole year in Sweden. I had been laying in my bed every morning holding our breath, and just being, I remember I was walking up the stairs, in my flat. I live on the fifth floor, and I was walking up the stairs on breath hold. And that, it was horrible. For 1 year I was doing this. And then came the time when the freediving competition was in the Philippines, and I went there, paid all this money to go there. I'm arriving there, and the second day I realized, okay, I get a cold. And when you have a cold in freediving, it's over, because your sinuses will be blocked for at least 3 or 4 weeks, possibly. And I went there, and there I did what you should never do in freediving. You should push, like, try to just push down to the depth. And freediving is a sport where, like the opposite of many extreme sports, where you should have as little adrenaline as possible and just being able to relax as much as possible. But there I had like more adrenaline, and I was just trying to push myself to the depth. And at 70 meters, I saw the bottom plate, and I was like trying to reach for it. And there I could feel something was wrong with my airways. And I was going up. And on the way up, I could actually feel that I had something like coming up to my throat. And then while on the surface, I was spitting in my hand, and I could see that there was just a lot of blood coming up from my lungs. And there I had got a rupture in my lungs. And in freediving, we call this a squeeze, lung squeeze. And, it takes a while to recover. And of course, then I had to just be away from the water. Being in the Philippines and training for this competition was just, I had nothing to do there anymore. And I was just coaching another athlete. And that was one of my bad moments when it comes to freediving, but also something that I learned a lot about. To also see that what happens when you're just pushing your body, and that when it comes to the ocean, it's such a strong force. You cannot really resist the pressure in a way. Like, you just have to let the pressure of the water do what it's supposed to do, in a way, and not push back, and be able to relax. And I think I was briefly talking a little bit about the free fall that my freediving instructor told me about, that I would explore. And that's the important part when it comes to the free fall, because from the surface and to around 15 to 20 meters, from that part you're finning down. You're using your fins, and you're using muscles to get down. But from the point at 15 or 20 meters, your lungs are being so compressed. At 20 meters, they're 1/3 of the size that they had on the surface. So at that point, you start to sink, because you become so heavy in the water. So you start to sink at around 20 meters, and that's just going faster and faster. So at that point, I'm just closing my eyes and just moving through the water, and just paying attention to what's going on, and just trying to be in the moment, to stay in the flow state. Mm-hmm. And then if I do something that I said that I did here when I had a bad experience and I resist, that's when there's a risk that I injure myself. Mm-hmm. Sure. And in freediving, you don't talk about the same injuries as you do in many other sports, like a broken leg or something like that. That's unheard of when it comes to freediving, because you're in this environment of the water, and what can happen is that you can damage the airways, for example, because you have the air spaces of the lungs, of the sinuses, and the ears. Those places you can damage when you're going under pressure. So I can mention another incident which was also kind of like negative for me, which had a negative impact. It was also in the Philippines, and I was doing a training dive. I had just had like a cold coming up to this dive, but I felt okay diving this day. It's very important to know your body in freediving, to kind of like wake up and to look at the heart, like, okay, is it higher or lower than my normal? And if it's higher, you should just stay away from the water. And here I was like, okay, it's kind of okay. And I could feel that my sinuses were a little bit blocked, but still okay. I went out to the ocean with my friend. He was doing safety on me. I was doing an 83 meters dive, which is, for me, it was quite deep at this point, it was like a personal best dive. I went down and I start coming up, and on the way up, I could notice that something was wrong. And what I noticed is that I start losing my motoric control, and I start to see double.
Wow.
And when I noticed that, I was like, okay, now my priority will just be to come up to the surface as fast as possible. So I met my safety diver, and I saw two of him. Like I could see, it looked like I had two safety divers. And we came up to the surface, and the same was going on there. I saw two faces, and I saw double horizon. And I've heard about vertigo before, that that's something you can experience. And I actually thought that I had decompression sickness, like the bends when you get like a blood clot, kind of. And this is what I was afraid that I had. So I was going up on the boat, and I noticed also that I felt strong nausea because of the vertigo, and I couldn't really move properly. And I went later to the ER, and they could see that I had actually air that was trapped in my inner ear, and that caused this vertigo. And this is something that is pretty rare, but it can still happen in freediving, that you get this air trapped in the inner ear, and therefore you get vertigo.
Wow.
So yeah, that was a scary accident.
Mm.
But yeah, it was a short recovery, and I came back. Yeah.
That's great. There's so much to pick out from what you've just said there. Like, it's fascinating and really, really interesting. And what you mentioned about flow state, that's just so true in so many other sports, when the tactical, technical, mental, and physical all align, and it's effortless, and you almost feel like you're floating through whatever it is you're doing, with no resistance or difficulty from anything. It's just all comes together. And I've explored that a lot, and we've explored that a lot as a company with all our coaches. And the best performances we've personally experienced, but also seen, have all come out of that flow state.
Mm.
But it's so difficult to repeat, because it's so different for everybody. But there's not a secret recipe, but it's also so dependent on the moment. So I think the other thing related to that is just that ability to, which you alluded to, is that ability to be able to play and train and try things under a no stress or no pressure environment as well. Allows you to discover these new skills and these new mental processes as well. So it's just so interesting to hear you speak about that. And yeah, I'm glad you ended up being okay, because I can imagine if things go wrong in freediving, they go wrong very quickly, and they can be very serious as well. Yeah, it's fascinating to hear that.
Yeah, but like you said as well, when it comes to other sports, it's so important to find this playfulness because it's very common that you see that people, they go into a sport for one reason when they're a kid, because they love the sport and because they enjoy the process of playing the sport. Because that's what you say when you do a sport, you play pretty much. And and after a while, a lot of people, they lose that when you start competing on a high level and so on. And in a sport like freediving, where it's so mental, it's very evident that you cannot perform like that. I've never seen a freediving performing a good dive being stressed. Like, it just can't happen. Like, it's impossible. And like you said, I think being able to reach the flow state, it's easier said than done. It's something that you have to repeat and try to be able to get all these technical aspects to the core. And for me, it really helped to be able to do a lot of visualizations. Because we were talking briefly about the kind of training I do outside of the water, which in freediving we call that dry training. So I would also, while I was doing my breath hold exercises every morning, I would also close my eyes and just visualize the dive in the actual environment. And as you know, our brain cannot really tell the difference so well from an actual, like, being in the water in the Philippines, or if I'm just in my bed in Sweden. And it really helped me to be able to just do this visualization training in bed for a year, because a lot of free divers, they thought it was weird that I was able to just go to this place in the Philippines, and I was training for just 1 or 2 months and be able to dive to maybe say 80, 85 meters. A lot of free divers, they, on the other hand, they stay in a place or they live in a place where you can dive deep all year round.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
But I noticed that it's actually possible just to visualize and do this kind of visualization practice leading up to the dive. And I think that goes for many sports as well, that using this visualization technique, it's really helpful. And trying to visualize things very clearly, how they feel on your, how the temperature will be on the skin. For me, it will be the temperature of the ocean, and how the sound will be. The sound in the ocean will be like crackling sound of like the fish eating on the corals, and then just closing my eyes and imagining the dive step by step.
You hear so many stories about that, don't you? About records being broken or competitions being won, and people say in the interviews afterwards, "Well, I imagined myself, I saw myself do that," and that links to something I often say to athletes as well, is that you don't necessarily rise to your level of performance, but you sink to your level of preparation. And if you've done all the work and it's good, honest, quality work, and it's done over an appropriate timeline, and it's consistent, then there's no reason why you can't achieve such greatness in what you do. Whereas if you force it or you rush it or you don't truly believe it, then you're already getting in your own way really before you even start. I have a few more questions, Alexander, for you. I've got so many, but I'm just trying to pick the key ones that I think the listeners would really want to know. And that would be what does your preparation look like? So how would you periodize your training and your events? So typically when we work with our athletes, we periodize them on a macro on a yearly basis, on a meso monthly basis, and a micro like a weekly basis. And it's reverse engineered. So you've got your key tournaments, which really happen depending on the sport, like once, twice a year. I suppose like foundation type of events every month, and then possibly like weekly events just kind of for maintenance. How do you go about that for your free diving and your sport? Is that a system that you follow, or do you do it differently?
No, it sounds very similar to what I do as well. Like you do it in most sports when you compete in a higher level. That for me, for example, I would start the season by doing a lot of volume and low intensity. Mm-hmm. So in freediving terms, that would be that I will maybe train a lot in the pool. So I will do dynamic swims, just swimming horizontally in the pool on breath hold, but not experiencing so much discomfort, so, like almost no discomfort. Mm-hmm. And just being able to repeat this and train technique mostly. So just having a high volume, low intensity in the beginning. And then when I get closer and closer to the competition, I will then increase the intensity, but lower the volume. So if you take the example of the pool, for example, I will swim longer distances, but with shorter breathing intervals, meaning that I will experience more discomfort and also longer swims. But this I can only do for a very short period of time because I will burn out if I will do this all the time.
Sure.
Because the mental discomfort you feel when you do this kind of swims, especially in the pool for some reason, it feels horrible when you're swimming long distances and holding your breath and almost have no time to breathe in between. This is perfect training because you build up a lot of CO2 tolerance, but you have to be careful so you don't overdo it, because it's easy to hit the wall and just get burned out when it comes to freediving, like because it's so mental and you're going through so much discomfort. It's a very like particular sport in that sense, that it's all about like being able to resist this kind of discomfort, at least in the beginning of it. Like I think everyone knows how it feels to hold your breath. Like you start holding your breath and then you start to get this weird feeling like, oh gosh, this is horrible. I just want to breathe now. Yeah. That's just the beginning of it. And then I can tell you it's not getting easier. Like it's just getting worse and worse for every second until the point when it starts getting nicer. And that's the time when you should start to breathe again.
Of course. And what would you say your top kind of takeaways or advice would be for people listening about dealing with stress? Because I've swam all my life, I've surfed a lot, I've been caught under big waves, all different parts of the world, and it's not a pleasant experience, and it's stressful. And I could only imagine that, you know, diving very deeply underwater is going to create natural amounts of stress, which, you know, possibly will improve. You can improve how you deal with that. Obviously, the more you do it, the higher level you are. Are there any kind of things that you found have really helped you with that?
So for me, it's been a lot being sure about my own capabilities of the sport itself.
Okay.
and also being able to know that, you know, our bodies can do it. Like we can hold our breath for at least 4 minutes, no problem, when it comes to oxygen. Like everybody can do it. You can put everyone on the street, get them to hold their breath. And if you take away this stress center in our brain, you can hold your breath for quite a long time, but it's more about being able to deal with the discomfort. And knowing that and having that knowledge that I can do this makes me able to relax. And that gives me the confidence to dive and to be able to get to this depth. But like you also were also mentioning there, is that this is nothing that you can have to go from like 20 meters and just go to 80 meters in one go. If I manage one dive to one certain depth, I only increase for at least only 3 meters maximum, nothing more than that. And in that way, I'm able to adapt my mind and my body to the depth, getting used to the depth. And I think in freediving in particular, which is so important, so mental, you have to be able to relax at depth. And one thing that really helped me as well, more than just being sure that my body can hold the breath for so long, was to spend a lot of time at depth. One of my favorite things to do in freediving is to do what we call hang. This is when you dive down and then you hang at depth and you just chill. And I have one really beautiful dive that comes to my mind now that I did I think it was a few weeks before I went from the Philippines during the pandemic. And it was a weird situation because we were not able to dive during the days or any time actually in the Philippines because of the pandemic. So they closed off the ocean. And we went out in the night time instead. So me and my friend, we went out in the night and then we put down the line to 60 meters. And when you dive at night, you have this plankton in the water. When you move your arm, they light up. And I started my dive, and I see, as fast as I move my arms, they start to light up, and I continue down to 60 meters. And while I'm down there, I was just hanging there for around 1 minute, and just looking around. And at that moment, really felt like I was in outer space.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void were prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Amazing.
Because everything around me was this plankton lighting up, looks like stars. And it was just complete darkness, no one around. Because in freediving, you're by yourself down there. You don't have a safety dive or anything at that depth. So I was just down there alone for 1 minute, and it just felt very easy. And like we were talking about earlier, like I was able to get into this flow state, which meant that I was able to perform quite well. Holding my breath for a long time at that depth, and just looking around and enjoying the moment. And then I went back up to the surface, and that kind of experiences led me to feel comfortable and confident in also diving deeper. Yeah.
Amazing. That's such a cool story, and I can imagine that must have been quite an experience. It sounds really good.
It was beautiful, and I think you can, because you've probably seen the plankton in the ocean before, like when you're swimming in the night time, but also being able to just free fall down to this with them around you. Every time you move a limb, they light up around you, and it's something that will always stay in my mind. As a beautiful experience in freediving.
It's nice to have moments and memories like that.
Yeah.
Stay with you forever. They're very rare, but very special. Just to finish up, our audience is a mixture of athletes across all sports at different levels, particularly in extreme sports, and we work with lots of coaches and have lots of teachers and parents that are clients of ours, but also listen to the podcast. So it's quite a mixed bag. What would you say your kind of top pieces of advice would be for that audience that they can take away with them? Maybe if you can impart some wisdom from your experience from freediving that people may be about to put into their life or their sport moving forward.
Yeah, so I think for me it would be that when it comes to being able to feel confident in whatever it is, the sport, school, progress, and so on, it is to be confident in your abilities. And this is something that freediving really taught me. Mm-hmm. I would never think that I was able to dive to 85 meters. Telling me that when I started my freediving course in Thailand when I was 23 or whatever, like in a few years you will be able to dive to 85 meters. I would never have believed you. But being able to just enjoy and explore the process step by step and not really have so much of like this single goal in mind, but more enjoying what you're doing is the most important. And to enjoy the moment of the sport or the activity that you do. And that's going to help you reaching the goals that you're striving for. Like otherwise you tense up and you will not be able to perform well. But as long as you enjoy, and of course that also comes down to if you're not able to enjoy the process or the activity, you're not going to be able to repeat it and to do it for say 2 or 3 hours per day. Because that's probably what you need if you're going to exceed and if you're going to be the best at something.
Of course. You
have to be able to do that. And for that, you need to love what you're doing and have a passion for what you're doing. And for me, it came naturally that I had this love and passion for freediving. But I could also feel like it was fading away when I started to focus too much on a single goal that I wanted to reach. It was important to be playful in the training and to be playful in the competition. And like in the end, what are we doing when we're competing? We are just grown-ups playing around in some made-up competition that we built just to have fun, right? If you zoom out from the picture, that's pretty much what you do. And I think being able to zoom out and see it for what it actually is makes it possible to also perform well in stressful situation.
Amazing. That's such a great message to finish on. Thank you very much for sharing that. That's awesome advice. And I can personally relate to that too a lot. If people are listening and they would like to follow you or like to ask you some questions, what's the best way that they can contact you and get in touch?
So Alexander Freediver. It is my website, alexanderfreediver.com, Instagram, Alexander Freediver, and what more do I have? Gmail, alexanderfreediver@gmail.com. So those three, if you want to get in contact for whatever reason, getting to know more about freediving or so on, just feel free to send me a message I'm happy to reply.
Amazing. I'll pop all those links and tags and handles into the show notes so people can click on them directly below. But Alexander, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I found it fascinating. And all the best for the future, your future endeavours.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And also thank you for this conversation. It's been awesome.
Thanks for listening to the 39th episode. We hope you enjoyed the show. It would really help us out if you could please leave a rating and or review on whatever platform you're listening on. Be sure to check out our website www.extremesportsperformance.com that has details about our consultancy services, our in-person and online support, our in-person and online education, our media pages, our contact details, and how to subscribe for free to stay informed about company news and updates. Join our growing social media community on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. Links to these can be found at the top and bottom of our website and via any search engine. Until next time, take care.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.